They told you happiness was the purpose, that joy was your birthright, that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, believed fully enough, then you would be rewarded with a life that felt whole. They told you to chase your dreams, follow your heart, and never give up. Because somewhere at the end of that long pursuit, they promised happiness would be waiting. They lied, not because they meant to hurt you, not because they were cruel, but because they were deceived just as you were. They too inherited the lie, clung to it, and passed it on, believing that if they kept running, kept hoping, kept trying, then the ache inside them would vanish. But it didn't, and it won't. Because happiness, the kind you were promised, is not real. It is not lasting. It is not the natural state of human life. And the more you chase it, the more it recedes into the distance like a mirage on a burning road. If you feel empty even after moments of success, if you feel numb in the places where joy was supposed to bloom, if you lie awake at night asking, "Why doesn't this feel like enough?" then understand this. There is nothing wrong with you. There is something wrong with what you were told to expect from life. Happiness was sold to you as the goal, but in truth, it was a distraction, a glowing mask placed over the suffering that lies at the heart of existence. You suffer because you want because you live, and to live, as I have said, is to will. The will to live is not concerned with peace. It is not concerned with stillness or fulfillment. It only wants to continue, to reproduce, to consume, to strive. And so it moves through you, whispering promises it will never keep. Just a little more, just a little further, just this one person, just this one dream. And you obey, believing that the next arrival will be the last. But it never is, because the will does not know arrival. It only knows movement. This is the grand lie of happiness, that it is something to be attained, possessed, sustained, that it is a reward for the virtuous, the intelligent, the disciplined. But happiness, real, lasting, stable happiness, does not belong to this world. At best, you will know moments of relief, fleeting pauses in the storm, but they do not endure. They cannot. Because the will does not stop speaking. And the tragedy is this: by believing the lie, you turn your suffering into shame. You think, I must have done something wrong. I must be broken. Everyone else seems happy. Why not me? But they are not happy. They are distracted. They are chasing. They are pretending. Just like you were, and just like you, they will crash into the truth eventually, if they are brave enough to stop running. So listen now and listen well. You were not born to be happy. You were born to suffer, to strive, to be deceived, and perhaps, if you are honest, to see through that deception. And in that seeing, to begin a different path. Not one of pleasure, but of clarity. Not one of joy, but of understanding. Not one of success, but of silence. If these words do not comfort you, good. They are not meant to. They are meant to open the wound you've been taught to cover. Because only once it is opened can it begin not to heal, but to be seen for what it truly is. The mark not of failure, but of reality. You suffer not because something is wrong, but because you are alive. Suffering is not the interruption of life's purpose. It is life's most honest expression. Remove all illusions, all distractions, all hopes disguised as plans. And what remains is suffering. Hunger, loss, restlessness. The gnawing awareness that nothing lasts and nothing fully satisfies. This is not pessimism. It is observation. You need only sit quietly for a while, without stimulation or noise, and feel what emerges in the silence. It is not joy. It is unease. You suffer because you will, you want, you chase. The will to live does not sleep. It compels you to seek, to strive, to attach, to cling. And every time it is satisfied, it begins again. When you are cold, warmth feels like joy. But it is not joy. It is the relief from pain. When you are hungry, food feels like happiness. But it is not happiness. It is the interruption of suffering. And so it is with every so-called pleasure. Every instance of happiness you have known has been nothing more than the temporary cessation of a particular form of pain. But even then, the pain is never gone. It only changes shape. The man who was once lonely finds love only to fear its loss. The man who was once poor becomes wealthy, only to grow restless. The child who once longed to grow up finds adulthood filled with burdens. And the old man, who has had everything, sees clearly, often too late, that every pleasure fades, and every comfort breeds its own kind of suffering. Even in stillness there is no peace, for boredom emerges. And boredom is not harmless. It is the return of the will in disguise. It whispers, "This is not enough. Do something, become someone, find something new." And so you move again, not because you have found meaning, but because you cannot bear the silence. The will has resumed its command. This is the nature of existence, not linear but circular, not redemptive but repetitive. And the sooner you stop expecting relief from this cycle, the sooner you can begin to see it clearly. All philosophies that promise happiness in this life, through virtue, through pleasure, through love, are only trying to dress this cycle in more palatable forms. They do not end suffering. They reframe it. They decorate it. But if you are brave enough to look without decoration, what you will see is not horror, but truth. That to exist is to lack. To live is to long, and no amount of striving, believing, or achieving will change that. It is not your personal defect. It is the condition of all beings cursed with consciousness. And if you feel tired of it, truly metaphysically tired, it is because you have begun to awaken. Do not look away, do not distract yourself again. Let the truth settle like dust. Let it coat the surfaces of your ambitions and color the background of your fantasies. For only when you see that suffering is not the enemy, but the structure, can you begin the slow turning away from the lie that promised happiness and step into a deeper, colder, and perhaps more honest freedom. The lie of happiness did not arise within you. It was implanted, shaped, repeated, reinforced. From your earliest breath, you were not taught to see, but to hope. To hope that one day the ache you could not name would disappear. That one day, through effort or virtue or love, you would finally arrive at the place called enough. You were not shown how to sit with dissatisfaction. You were shown how to run from it, toward achievement, toward romance, toward salvation, toward the future. Always the future. This conditioning was not accidental. It is the design of the will, but it is carried out through the structures of society. Religion taught you that happiness would be your reward. If not now, then after death. That obedience to dogma would bring inner peace, that suffering meant purpose, and that joy was the stamp of divine approval. But what they called salvation was only another form of striving, another horizon, another chase. Then came romantic love. You were told there was someone out there who would make the pain go silent, a person whose gaze would redeem your loneliness, whose body would complete your own. And so you searched, and when you found them and the pain continued, you blamed them, or yourself. But not the illusion, never the illusion. You were told to work hard, to build, to earn. That happiness was the reward of those who proved themselves. But effort does not silence the will, it accelerates it. Each success births new hunger. Each milestone makes the next one necessary. You are not climbing toward peace. You are climbing to escape the emptiness that greets you every time you stop. Even your pleasures have been weaponized. You are sold happiness in the form of objects, experiences, identities. You are told that with the right clothes, the right habits, the right mindset, you will become someone who feels whole. But wholeness is not for sale. What they sell you is stimulation, distraction, temporary blindness, and each dose requires another. Not because you are weak, but because the lie demands constant repetition. These systems, religion, romance, consumerism, self-improvement, are not evil. They are blind. They are servants of the will, just as you were. Their purpose is not to free you from suffering, but to prolong the game, to keep you moving, to keep you striving, to keep the machinery of desire in motion generation after generation. You may wonder why so few escape it. It is because the truth is bitter and the lie is sweet. The truth leaves you alone with nothing to chase. The lie gives you something to live for, even if it is false. Most will choose the lie, and they will suffer, loudly, repeatedly, never understanding why the joy they were promised always slips through their fingers. But if you can bear the truth, if you can see the architecture of the illusion and not look away, then something in you will begin to shift. You will stop running, not because you are defeated, but because you are no longer deceived. And that is the beginning, not of happiness, but of clarity. They show you pictures, smiling faces, effortless mornings, fulfilled lovers in sunlit rooms. They tell you it's real, this thing called happiness, that if you find the right person, earn enough, live well, think positively, you will settle into a life that sustains joy. But if this were true, why does it never last? Why does every peak turn to plateau? Why does every comfort rot into routine? Why does the happy life, when finally achieved, feel so strangely hollow? It collapses because it was never built on truth. It was built on forgetting the structure of the will, forgetting the impermanence of all things, forgetting the nature of human consciousness. The so-called happy life is a construct, a temporary arrangement of circumstances that must be constantly repaired, adjusted, reanimated. And even then, it decays. The partner who once excited you becomes familiar. The home becomes a cage. The career becomes an obligation. The pleasure becomes a pattern. And what once felt like peace now feels like stagnation. This is not an error in your choices. It is not that you picked the wrong lover, the wrong job, the wrong life path. It is that the life itself, any life built around sustained happiness, is impossible. Not statistically, but metaphysically, because the will cannot be fulfilled, it cannot be satisfied, and therefore the illusion of a lasting happy state must collapse, either by internal decay or by external disruption. One way or another, the fantasy breaks. Even the so-called enlightened suffer, the ones who have fame, wealth, beauty. Often they suffer more, because they have run out of illusions. They have everything, and the hunger persists. They are surrounded by what the world says brings joy, and still they feel the emptiness. That is the final cruelty of the happy life. When it fails, you are left not only with your suffering, but with the death of your last hope. The more you cling to it, the more you suffer when it fades, and so most people, sensing its fragility, begin to live in fear. Fear of loss, of change, of death, of boredom. Their life becomes a project of maintenance, not living but defending the conditions that once made them feel briefly alive. This is not joy, it is anxious preservation, and it always fails. You may think this is bleak, but what is truly bleak is pretending otherwise. What is truly despairing is trying to hold on to something that by its nature must dissolve. Once you see this, really see it, the collapse of the happy life is no longer a tragedy. It is a necessity. It is the end of the lie, and in that end something else can begin. Not joy, but peace. Not the ecstasy of arrival, but the quiet dignity of no longer chasing. You do not need to destroy your life. You need only to stop expecting it to make you happy. Then the collapse becomes a liberation, and what remains is not failure, but freedom. There is a silence that comes when the chase ends, not because you have attained what you sought, but because you finally see that it was never real. The hunger you thought could be cured by success, by love, by progress, that hunger was not pointing to anything outside of you. It was the voice of the will itself, speaking through you, pushing you forward not toward fulfillment but toward repetition. And when you see that clearly, the movement stops. Not the motion of your body, but the movement of your belief. This is where peace begins, not in pleasure, not in triumph, not in some perfected version of life, but in the moment you stop asking life to do what it cannot. When you cease demanding that the world make you happy, you begin to see it as it is. Not as a paradise, not as a prison, but as a phenomenon. Temporary, unstable, unconcerned with your contentment. You no longer take its failures personally. You no longer treat your dissatisfaction as evidence of brokenness. You simply see the game is structured this way. And so you walk differently. You still work, but not to be fulfilled. You still love, but not to be completed. You still live, but without the weight of illusion on your shoulders. You become quieter, less reactive. You no longer need to win. You no longer fear being forgotten. You no longer believe that something is missing. The will still speaks, but you do not obey. The world still seduces, but you do not fall for its promises. You live not in pursuit, but in perception. You see clearly and you do not flinch. This is not the peace of the smiling optimist. It is not the joy of the blind. It is the hard-earned stillness of one who has suffered enough to stop lying. People may not understand this change in you. They may say you've grown cold, distant, unmotivated. Let them. They are still running. They still believe the lie. They must, until they suffer enough to question it. You, however, have already suffered that much. And now, you are beginning to live differently. Not better, not higher, but honestly. You do not seek happiness. You seek reality. And if happiness arises, you let it pass like a breeze. You do not cling. You do not chase. Because you know it is not the goal. It is the shadow cast by something else. And when it fades, you do not mourn. You return to stillness and to the truth that no longer needs to be decorated. This is the beginning of real peace. Not happiness achieved, but craving abandoned. Not salvation attained, but delusion surrendered. And once you have felt this kind of peace, even for a moment, you will never again confuse it with the happiness they promised you. Because this peace does not excite you. It empties you. It softens the demand. It quiets the mind. It gives nothing, but asks nothing in return. And in a world built on hunger, that is a kind of miracle. You were not meant to be happy. This is the truth they hid from you, not because they wished to deceive, but because they could not bear to face it themselves. They needed the story. They needed to believe that happiness was out there waiting, and so they told you to believe it too. But you have seen through the story. You have looked behind the mask, and now you can no longer pretend. Do not grieve this awakening. Yes, it hurts to see the lie. Yes, it hurts to watch the illusions that once gave your life momentum begin to dissolve, but there is dignity in this seeing. There is peace in no longer chasing what cannot be caught. You have not failed. You have stepped outside the cycle. You have turned away, not from life, but from the noise that disguises it. This path is not celebrated. There are no trophies for lucidity, no applause for detachment. Most will not understand your silence. They will ask why you are not trying harder, why you are not more excited, more hopeful, more driven. Let them ask. You owe no one the performance of happiness. What you owe to yourself is truth, and you are living it now, even if it costs you every comfort the world once promised. The man who sees clearly may walk alone, but he walks in peace. He no longer flinches from suffering because he no longer expects life to be something it is not. He no longer fears the future because he no longer places his salvation in it. He no longer grasps at joy because he has seen its true nature, impermanent, fleeting, not to be clung to. And in releasing the need to be happy, he finds something far rarer: stillness, integrity, clarity. If you have felt these words echo something you already knew, something you have long suspected but could never name, then stay. Subscribe, not for promises but for the absence of them. And in the comments tell me, what was the moment you first realized happiness was never coming? The moment the illusion cracked, and you began to see the structure behind it. Your words may be quiet, but to someone else, someone who is just now beginning to question what they were told, they may be everything. Speak not to be heard. Speak so another may see. And in this shared seeing, we become not happier, but freer.